And there would be cases out in the hallway for, like, road cases for their gear. Because that band had already been touring before I was in it. And, like, this Fender Twin amplifier came out in a case, and they took it out of the case, and that was Jerry Garcia's Fender Twin. And it was still in a Grateful Dead road case. And I was just like, oh, fuck, you know.
That was Joe Bagale, his voice, and the music you hear in the background. I'm Jeff, and this is Storied San Francisco. Every week on this podcast, you'll hear from musicians, bartenders, artists, and San Franciscans from all walks of life, telling stories, sharing personal histories, and trying to put into words what makes this city so special. Quickly, we just wanted to remind you that we're asking for your help to keep this podcast free and thus available for the most ears possible. Go to the store page on our website, storiedsf.com, to learn about ways you can contribute. We appreciate everything you're able to do. Welcome to episode 31, part 2. In part 1, Joe walked us through his life growing up in New York State, with music a central part of his teen years. In this podcast, Joe shares all the different musical iterations he's undergone since moving to San Francisco in 2003. Many bands and solo projects have culminated in the last few years with his project, Otis McDonald. By the way, the music we've used in the intros and outros for this podcast since the beginning are all Otis tracks. Here's Joe.
Yeah, so then the drums showed up and set them up, and my brother Adrian and I started jamming all the time. He would come over because he didn't have space to jam in his little apartment over on Sutter. And and I started beating the streets, so to speak, really actually Craigslist, and trying to meet musicians to play with, and that proved to be quite a bit harder than I had hoped. However, I did find musicians that I still work with to this day on Craigslist.
Awesome.
One particular musician was this guy Matt Berkeley that it was a friend of mine a friend of mine that I had met through another person I'd met on Craigslist, had forwarded me this Craigslist ad of this band Reorchestra looking for a drummer. And that was actually a year and a half after I had been living out here. And I responded to that ad and went and auditioned and got the gig. And then that's kind of how I started playing in the scene.
What other kind of jobs, quickly, before we really get into music, at the to the exclusion of everything else, what other kind of jobs? Work. Yeah, anything fun?
All I did was wait on tables. Yeah,
but where besides? You said
Park Hyatt.
Park Hyatt.
That was it.
Oh, the whole time.
I worked there for 2.5 years.
Okay,
almost 3 years. I mean, the money was really good, and I had no responsibilities. You know, I would work there for breakfast and lunch, and walk with $200 to $300 in tips every day.
Wow.
And then I would work dinners, and all the other waiters thought dinners were a really bad time to work because you're in the financial district, and it was a lot slower at night, but the menu was a lot more expensive at night, and we had quite the wine selection. So if you knew how to sell, you could make some money. And I rather work at nights because it was a shorter shift. I could make just as much money, and then I'd be done at 10 o'clock. And, I would use my brother's expired driver's license and go out and get into clubs. I looked old enough, I just didn't have an ID. And somebody had taken my money to give me a fake ID and never saw that person again. So I think the first place I ever went into was the Boom Boom Room. And that was a game changer for me.
With a fake ID, or was it? Okay.
Sorry, Boom Boom Room.
No, I think they're good with that now. Kids don't do what Joe did.
Yeah. I play there all the time now too. Yeah. It's hilarious.
Yeah, you paid the karma back.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I would still go in there. I was respectful. I wouldn't do anything crazy.
Sure.
I just wanted to see music and meet musicians.
And what a place to land.
Man, especially then in 2003.
Yeah.
The Boom Boom Room was super happening back then, and so many great bands would play there after they played at the Fillmore. And they still do that. I don't know if it happens as frequently as it used to. But then there was this great group of musicians that would come down from Seattle. That was a part of this band called Mock Tube, but they would play in this all improvised group. Every show they would do was improvised. It was called Das Root, and the leader in that group was Reggie Watts, and who's now on late night TV. He's a great comedian, but he's always been a fantastic musician and singer and improviser. And he just would like light up the stage. I was just so blown away by that dude. And I remember chatting with him on set breaks and stuff, and he was just very cool. I just didn't know anybody. I didn't know who he was, but I always knew he'd be a star. And then one night after waiting on tables, I went on a date with this young lady who took me to the Mission and took me to Bruno's. And I got into Bruno's, no problem. And there was this group called the Transmission Trio playing. And there was this young, fiery MC known as Dublin who happened, well, I found this out while I was there, happened to be this woman's ex-boyfriend. And she brought me there basically to make me jealous. or make him jealous. Yeah, but really ended up making me jealous. Sorry.
Right.
And, but not really, because, like, I mean, she knew I was a musician, and she just wanted to take me to see some music, so I thought, or whatever, but then those two ended up hanging out, and I just like watched the show, and I was like really blown away by Dublin, and gave him my demo tape, or my demo CD, which was this music I was writing and recording in my garage in West Portal. And then I'd say like maybe 6 months later, I started going back to Bruno's, and I'd sneak in through the back door, because the musicians would all just be like hanging out in the back, smoking or whatever. And that's when I met Adam Thies, and I'm in the Jazz Mafia scene. It was introduced to me, and they would do these things every Tuesday night.
They were already playing Jazz Mafia?
Oh yeah, Jazz Mafia Tuesdays was already a thing. And this was in the Bruno's, it was like the old Bruno's, so it was like the semicircle stage in the middle of the room. And so I just started going all the time. I would take my brother over there, and we'd watch the Realistic Orchestra. I mean, we'd watch like a fucking big band pack into this room. There was like more people on stage than there were in the audience,
Yep.
playing this highly sophisticated music, fusing like hip hop and jazz music. I was just like in heaven. I was like, this is incredible. And then how I started playing at Bruno's was through this band Reorchestra that I had auditioned for on Craigslist, and that's kind of how I was able to meet Adam. Besides just meeting him backstage, I don't know that he really even remembered who I was, but I think he started seeing me play at Bruno's with this group, and then I realized I needed some education in like music business, and I needed to understand the recording program I was using more, because I grew up with tape, and I was just treating it like a tape machine, but I knew that there was more possibilities. And so I enrolled in this this program at SF State that I think it's called the CEL program, and it was mostly taking place at the time their downtown campus, which was unfortunate because I lived right across the street from the main campus, but it was fine. And so I took a class called How to Start an Independent Record Label, and then I took a Pro Tools 101 course and learned a lot about Pro Tools. And then this independent record label class was really informative, although that stuff is probably, it just doesn't even matter now. However, the teacher was majorly influential on me. I just thought this guy was the coolest motherfucker. Like, he reminded me of Ray Liotta in Goodfellas. Like, his laugh, like, his look, like, but he was just, like, hip and, like, a jazz musician and a percussionist, and he happened to have played with so many people. Like, he jammed with Tito Puente, he'd played with Prince, Sheila E. Like, he was this Bay Area dude that I come to find out later was part of the family that started Fantasy Records in Berkeley, and his name is John Bendick. And John was so cool, and he really took a liking to me, and I brought him I brought in my demo CD, the same thing I had given to Dublin. I was just giving it to everybody. Gave it to Scott Amendola too while I was taking a drum lesson from him, and John really dug it, and he was like, "Man, you're really cool." He was like, "You should meet some people I know that are working at the studio." And one night after class, because they were evening classes, he and I walked down the street to Mission and 10th Street, and in between 9th and 10th on Mission Street was this place, Coast Recorders. I walked in there, and wasn't a very impressive lobby or anything, but then you walk in the back and it's this big, beautiful recording room in this kind of small control room. It's probably about the size of this, although with this giant mixing console in there, it felt really, really small. Mm-hmm. And there was this engineer there, this guy Sebastian Richard, and he was cool, and he was working on I don't know what the record was he was working on, but he was working on something, and he was very polite and let me just look around. And John was hoping to introduce me to this guy named Ben Jonas, who was one of the owners of that studio at the time, and but he wasn't there, and so John set up a meeting for us. And I got a call one day when I was getting out of work at like 2 p.m, and he was like, "Hey man, before you come to class tonight, I want you to go over to Coast, and I want you to meet this guy Ben." And so I go over and I meet Ben, and I think Ben thinks he's meeting a potential intern, and I don't know who I'm meeting. I'm just like, I'm just walking in to meet some guy, and I got my demo CD. And so I meet Ben, and I play him some of my songs, and his eyes light up, and he's like, "Yeah, you did this on your Mbox on your laptop?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And the sounds weren't that great or whatever. I thought I was making my record, and and I quickly realized after hearing the stuff he had made that I was making my demo.
Yeah.
And I sat down at his piano and I played him another song, and he was just like, he was really blown away. And he called me the next day. He was like, "Hey man, I'd really like to work with you. I think I could help you produce your record." And so I go and meet up with him, and then and where I go to meet up with him is at Bruno's. He takes me to Bruno's to see Jazz Mafia, and I'm like, "Yeah, I know these guys. Like, I've come over here to see them." And he's like, "Oh, these are my boys." And I was, "Really?" And then he takes me to this party afterwards at Adam Thies's house, and then I'm meeting all these musicians, and so I'm just like lit up, man. I'm like, okay, this is where I needed to be, and then it turns out that Ben and his roommate Gowan Matthews, this incredible guitar player, are looking for a new housemate at their house up in the Oakland Hills. And at that time, my roommates and I were all thinking about leaving the house, and we were just looking for different places. And so I was like, yeah, I jumped on it. And the big attraction is that Ben had another studio inside the house. And he had a big Pro Tools HD rig and all this fancy equipment that I never had. And he's like, "Why don't you move in?" And the rent, I think the rent was like $500 a month or $600 a month. That's how much I was paying in West Portal, by the way. It was $500 a month back in 2003 until 2006. And then I moved out to or maybe it was 2005 I moved to Oakland. Yeah, I moved to the Oakland Hills in 2005 and lived with Ben and Gowan. And Gowan and I were both kind of getting our chops together as producers at the same time, like really learning Pro Tools. And Ben gave us a studio to figure that out in. And then after living there for a few months, Ben asked if I wanted a job working at the studio, which I definitely did, and I didn't want to wait on tables anymore, and I was sick of having to work out every holiday and not go home for Christmas, and so he was like, "Well, I can't promise you a lot, but I can promise that I'll pay your rent, and if you can supplement the rest of your income from playing gigs or whatever, then you should do it." And I kept my job as an on-call server, and I was able to make $500 a month working at this recording studio, and I was just doing anything from getting coffee for people and having the opportunity to learn how to operate Pro Tools and for sessions, and then eventually I started doing more like managerial roles and working upstairs in the office, and I think I was quote unquote a manager there. I don't know how much of a manager I was, but I think that was my official title. I think I even had a business card too, which is funny. But I was working for Jonas Media. That was his company, and lo and behold, one day a session comes in and it's the Shotgun Wedding Quintet, and it's Adam Thies and Dublin, and I'm like, holy shit, these are those guys, and I'm talking to I'm talking to Adam out in the in like the lobby in the coffee area, and at that point I was kind of just starting to put together my band, which was with my brother Adrian on guitar, and then some of the guys from Reorchestra that I had been playing with, and our bass player couldn't play this one show with us, and Ben had booked my band with another artist he was working with named Spencer Day, and booked us at Café du Nord, the old Café du Nord. So this was probably 2006 at that point. And
what was your band's name at the time?
It was just the Joe Bagale Band.
Got it.
And we were just playing all the music I had been writing for my first album, and then some other covers and stuff. And I was leading the band from behind the drum set, singing and playing drums. And I asked Adam if he'd be available to sub, and he was like, sure. And, he's a working musician, and I was all scared to ask him, and
to sub on bass, right?
Yeah, to sub on bass.
Right. And
he came over for rehearsal, and I think we did the gig, and I think he dug it. He dug my vibe or whatever, and then I would I'd engineer a little bit on that Shotgun Wedding record that they were working on, and then eventually I got invited to sit in on one of the Jazz Mafia's Stevie Wonder tributes, maybe like the first one they did.
Yeah.
At Bruno's with the big band, and that was 2006 or 2007, and then that's when I started working with Jazz Mafia. Like after that, I did this gig, and then I went out on tour with this Czech artist that Ben was working with, Lenka Dusilova, and I started playing drums with her, and then when I came back, it was like he was just like, come to the next one. What
were you playing with Jazz Mafia?
I was
Drums?
just singing. Okay. And then Adam would put together smaller groups. Like I think the first time I started playing drums with Adam was I subbed for their drummer Pat Cordy at this club Royale that used to be in North Beach on Grant Street in between Green and Vallejo. And they were doing, for a long time, Jazz Mafia and this group called The Park were alternating Wednesdays doing a live open mic hip-hop night. And I started playing drums. I subbed one night, and then quickly after that, Adam and I and this keyboardist Matt Berkeley from Reorchestra, we started a group called Super Taster. And then we brought in this guitar player, John Monahan, who was always playing during the Realistic Orchestra gigs. And or I think we did sometimes we did a trio gig with John and Adam and me, and sometimes we did a trio gig with Matt and Adam and me. And then one time we played as a quartet, and we were like, hey, this is really cool. Let's keep doing this. And then at that point, I had already had my band, and already had my CD release show, which was at the Great American Music Hall.
Wow, not bad. Still called the Joe Bagale?
Still called the Joe Bagale Band. And at that point, my band had grown, and I was even more up front playing guitar. I had this drummer, Dave Tweedy, who could play guitar and drums. And these are all people I met through Ben Jonas. He was really a major connection for me in the Bay Area. And Adam was playing full-time with me at that point. I was playing with his groups, and he was playing in my groups, and it was all copacetic. And we played at the Great American Music Hall and did our big CD release show, and then I brought in some background singers on that, one of which was this young lady, Karen Page. And Karen and I had met because I was working with some of the musicians that were in Reorchestra in a cover band that they played in called Groove Us, which was like a party band. Horrible name.
Yes.
But they were just playing like predominantly like funk and rhythm and blues and soul songs, which I was all about, and I wanted to sing. And I realized I didn't mention this, but I went to college and I was really into jazz music. I was really into predominantly just instrumental music. Even though I knew how to sing, I never really took it seriously until I came out here, and until I heard that D'Angelo record and moved out here and started writing my own songs. That's when I started getting serious. Like, I want to be a singer, and I started, probably doing all the wrong things, trying to make my voice sound raspy like Ray Charles and.
What kind of wrong
John
things?
Say what?
What kind of wrong things?
Oh, like smoking
cigarettes
all the
and
time.
coffee. Yeah.
Cigarettes, coffee, whiskey.
Yeah.
And screaming. Like I didn't know how to sing properly. I just knew how to sing in tune.
And yet here you are.
And here I am.
You're doing fine.
Well, I think part of the reason Adam started hiring me a lot is they enjoyed the raspiness of my voice and I wasn't a super flashy singer. I just had a quality to my voice and I could sing these classic R&B songs and kind of do it in a way that was paying homage to like how it was done before. And everybody always compared me to Joe Cocker. That was always the thing,
Yeah, thank you very much.
And I so anyway, so going back to my CD release show. That band Groovis that I was playing with, the other singer in that band was Karen Page, and she was fantastic, and I was like blown away by her. And
she was the lead singer, or
we were both lead singers. Like we would trade off. She would do the female vocal songs, and I would do the male vocal songs, and that was pretty much it. And so I brought her in to sing background vocals with this woman Jessica Neighbor, who happened to be her vocal teacher at the time, and then Adam started inviting Karen to Jazz Mafia gigs, and that was awesome. And then eventually she became a part of the band with me, Adam, Matt, and John Monahan, and we were called Super Taster. And Super Taster eventually took over the Wednesday night residency over at Royale. And because I think at the time it was called like the Jazz Mafia Trio. It was just like some of the guys from Shotgun Wedding. And two of those guys, Pat and Joe, I think were burnt out on doing it. They had been doing it for a year or something. And so we took it over, and man, we did it for like 3 years. I think that thing went on for like 4 years, and that was amazing. And what was really cool is the other band that would alternate with us, the Park. They had this keyboardist in that band named Ben Schweer, and Ben, going all the way back to the Craigslist stuff, he was the first musician I met on Craigslist that was super awesome, and he went to SF State. And he just walked across the street one day and came to my house, and we jammed, and we would jam with my brother, and it was just it was really funny. And we even started a band. We were just starting a band, and we were rehearsing at this spot that he was renting. And you were talking about roommates in studio spaces, whatever. Well, the other people that were renting that spot were the people in the Park, and so when I was in that band or starting that band with him, I had gotten the gig with Reorchestra, and that band was working a lot, and we were traveling and stuff, and so I basically stopped doing that band and went and played with Reorchestra full time because I thought this was my big break, And Ben started playing with the Park, and we were brought back together by the Royale gig, which was really hilarious, and and then I just started working with Jazz Mafia a bunch, and around 2008 is when Adam started writing the Brass Bows and Beats hip hop symphony, and he brought me in to help write vocal stuff that accompanied it, and Karen also, and and then we premiered that in 2009, and that was like a big deal, and that is what led us to traveling all around the country and playing the Montreal Jazz Fest, and
nice,
playing the Monterey Jazz Fest, the Newport Jazz Fest, played Central Park at the summer stage, and it was just just incredible. And all the while I was still just writing songs and working on my second Joe Bagale album, and I did that, and about the time that was finished, that album anyway, and the Jazz Mafia big orchestra stuff was kind of fizzling down or fizzling out, then at that point I got the call to audition for the Mickey Hart Band, and two of my friends were in the Mickey Hart Band, which one was my old roommate Gowan, and then this woman Crystal Monet Hall, who I absolutely loved and adored, and we had worked together a bunch through Ben Jonas, because he had managed her and produced her album, and she started working with Jazz Mafia too at that time. Actually, around the time that Karen started fizzling out of the Jazz Mafia scene, Crystal came in and started doing a lot of the female vocal stuff, and so that's how her and I got tight. And in the Mickey Hart band, she was sharing the lead singing position with this male vocalist and multi-instrumentalist named Tim Hockenberry. And Tim and Mickey did not get along, and Tim eventually quit. And then I got a call asking if I wanted to audition. I think Gowan and Crystal and Ben had put my name in, and I played multiple instruments, and I was also familiar with the Grateful Dead music, which Tim wasn't. I knew their music from when I was a kid. I was like, yeah, shit, I'll audition for the Grateful Dead.
Yeah, sure.
I want to do that. And one of the other members in that band was Dave Schools from Widespread Panic. When I was a kid, I was really into jam bands. If you recall, I was talking about that. And Widespread Panic was a band I would go see, and Fish was a band I'd go see. I never saw the Dead, but I was hyper aware of Mickey Hart because I was a drummer, and he had the Planet Drum record that had like all the greatest percussionists in the world on that one record. And so I didn't have anything like that where I was making that kind of money and touring on like a big tour bus and playing sold out shows and being up front.
Were you at all starstruck to meet Mickey, or was it more just like
maybe like a tiny bit?
Yeah.
But when I walked into his studio up at his house, the first thing I saw were these huge drums. I forget what they're called, but they're like these three big drums, and they had tie-dye drum heads on it. And I remember seeing those drums in Grateful Dead concert footage. Right. And I was like, holy shit, like, yeah, I know that.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
And there would be cases out in the hallway for, like, road cases for their gear, because that band had already been touring before I was in it. And, like, this Fender Twin amplifier came out in a case, and they took it out of the case, and that was Jerry Garcia's Fender Twin, and it was still in a Grateful Dead road case, and I was just like, oh fuck, Yeah. And then Dave Schools walked out, and I was like, oh shit. I think I might have been more starstruck by Dave, because I started hanging and jamming a little bit with Gowan and Dave and the drummer Inks Herman for a little bit before Mickey walked in. Then I turned around, and then like Mickey was there, and I was like, oh shit, hi, nice to meet you. And the audition really just kind of consisted of us jamming, and they were just trying to get really weird and see if I could keep up, and ultimately I kept up, and then I remember at the end of that jam, Mickey wasn't behind his rig anymore, and then I like turned around and he was right behind me eating a sandwich, and he was like, so you want to join the band? And I was like, yeah, totally,
let's do it.
And then we broke for lunch, and yeah, I called my wife, or she was my girlfriend at the time. She wasn't even my fiance, but I already had plans of proposing to her, and told her I got the gig. And
did joining that band mean you had to give up any of the other stuff you were doing? Because you sounds like you're doing a lot, Jazz Mafia.
Yeah. Well,
the Royale gig.
So, like I said, like the Royale gig at that point was done.
Oh, okay.
Super Taster was no longer a band.
Okay.
This is fast forwarding. This is like 2012 at this point. Okay. The big orchestras, like the Brass Bows and Beats, like the Jazz Mafia Symphony, that stuff was done. I don't think Adam had any interest in having to manage that many musicians. Totally understandable. And he was starting to pursue different stuff using a string quartet and a percussionist, and I wasn't really involved in that stuff. And I was starting a band with Matt Berkeley, who I was always working very closely with on either his record or on my second Joe Bagale record, because we were co-renting this recording studio in the East Bay called Bird and Egg Recording Studios, which is owned by Nino Moschella, who's also a majorly influential songwriter, producer guy on me. And we started a band called Hot Einstein. I mean, it was really kind of Matt's band, and he brought in this guy Pete Canton on bass, this guy Darren Fox on guitar, and it really just started from these jam sessions in Matt's living room Friday mornings, and Matt would make us lunch, and Karen was there, and Crystal would come over too, because Crystal lived in the neighborhood. And so that was like the original band was Matt and Darren, Pete, me on drums, and Karen and Crystal. And Matt was just starting to get into like singing, and we were all backing him up, but we would all share lead vocal duty, and we were playing regularly at this old place in Oakland called Disco Volante, and then we booked some gigs in the city, and so that was just kind of getting going. And when I got the opportunity to do the Mickey Hart thing, and so I took the gig because I wanted to do it. Didn't mean I was going to be gone forever. I just would go out for like 2-week stints and come back. And I think the longest tour I ever did with Mickey was like a 2-month tour, but it was like 25 days and then 10 days off and then another 25 days. But that was a long one. But
that's a lot.
That was at the very end too. That was the last tour. But anyway, yeah. So I wasn't in Hot Einstein anymore. It wasn't my choice. I was kicked out.
Yeah.
And that sucks because that kind of like put a damper on my relationship with Matt. And that is what it is.
Yes, it is.
He didn't like me being in that band or something. I don't know. And because I didn't have enough time for Hot Einstein, which is, I don't know. I probably would have had plenty of time for it, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
But Adam and Jazz Mafia was super supportive. He was like, "Yeah, man, there'll be gigs when you're back home," and there was. Every time I was back home, I was playing with him.
Mm-hmm.
So it was easy. There was never a problem with musicians going out with bigger acts. It's like we were all in the same hustle together
and supportive.
Supportive,
and understood that the nature of the band was fluid.
Yeah. And we're just working class musicians.
Right.
And it's still that way with all the musicians I work with.
Cool.
And so I was out with Mickey for like a couple of years. And the end of 2013 was when that band was done. And at the end of 2013, I had all this money saved up and I married my wife. And we had a big party down in Mexico. And then I was broke.
Yeah.
But I was happy.
Yeah.
And I knew that I would just make ends meet how I always did and get gigs and everything. And
people who, if you've listened to this podcast before, without maybe knowing it, you've heard Otis McDonald. And let's hear the story.
So I get married and I'm out of work. Mickey Hart's not calling anymore. and I get an email from a person that works at YouTube, and YouTube is starting what's called the YouTube Audio Library, which is a royalty-free audio library of tracks for people to use in their videos without having to worry about paying a copyright infringement fee or whatever. And I quickly respond because I'm like, yeah, I'd love to get paid to make original music, and what are the requirements? And they're like, well, first you have to submit, a reel of music. And then our team will review your music and we'll get back to you. And so I did that, and that was by the end of that year, like before Christmas is when I got all that stuff in. And then come January, I get a call and they're like, yeah, we'd like to commission you to do 10 tracks. And I'm like, okay, great. And they tell me what it's a, set fee per track. And I was like, awesome, that'll help out. And so they give me a deadline, and I think the deadline was the 1st of February. And so I bust out 10 tracks. I've never had to write and record and complete 10 tracks.
10 original from originals.
From scratch, yeah.
Okay.
But instrumental. They didn't want music with vocals. And so I did it, and I impressed myself that I was capable of finishing something, because just like any other artist, like I struggle with with finishing stuff. I come up with stuff, but I'm, the most problems that any artist have is themselves. Like, we get in the way.
And calling it done.
Any
art.
Yeah. But if you have a deadline, that certainly induces creativity and productivity in finishing something. And so I finish these tracks, and I submit those tracks, and I put it under the name Joe Bagale. But one of the tracks on there was the song I had been kind of writing for the last few months, and the vibe of it was super reminiscent of Michael McDonald, and in my mind I was writing a song for Michael McDonald because of the hook that I had in it, but because I made it instrumental and I did it with a talk box, I never thought, well, I was like, oh, it's not going to be a Michael McDonald song, it's just going to be whatever. But then I in producing the track, I started adding some different elements to it. One particular element was the glockenspiel, and the pattern I was doing really reminded me of the song Strawberry Letter 23 by Shuggie Otis. And because there was those two different figures involved in influencing this song, I just called the song Otis McDonald. It was just like a very quick idea, and it was catchy. And when that music finally became available, which I think was like March, somebody used that song in this video, and it was this young lady that had a spider inside her mouth, and she looks at the camera and she smiles, and a giant spider crawls out of her mouth. And they play just a little snippet of that song. But all of a sudden one day, like, my YouTube channel for Joe Bagale was just fucking blowing up in it because I had that song on there. And it was just subscription after subscription, and I'm like,
did you have the other
shit.
9 tracks on there as well? Like all the...
No, I only had a couple of the other ones.
Okay.
Because I was trying to make like music videos for them, and I looked at it like this. These 10 tracks that I did for YouTube was the third Joe Bagale album. It was an instrumental album, and that was my approach to making all these songs. It's like, I'm going to promote it as an album, and so that Otis McDonald track, to me, was always the catchiest one, and so that was the first one I made like a little video for. And it's not much of a video, it's just like, it was me experimenting with like what's called parallax imaging, and I was using After Effects to do it, and I just like took a picture of myself and cut it out, and I had this like kind of weird zoom thing going on. But that was the way people could hear the whole track after they heard that video, because this girl had linked it back to that video on my channel. And that was when I saw the power of YouTube. I was like, holy shit. Like, I knew the power of YouTube because of like Justin Bieber and stuff was like starting to happen. But that's when I really saw the power of the YouTube audio library. And thank God they came back to me at the end of April, and they're like, hey, we'd like to commission you to do 30 tracks. And we also need some music like more like in the hip-hop genre, because we're lacking hip-hop tracks. And they were like, can you do that? And I was like, sure. Because the first 10, they gave me free reign, and they essentially gave me free reign here too. They just asked if I could contribute and put hip-hop next to it, and I was like, sure. And me being a hip-hop head, I was really into Jay Dilla and Madlib and Q-Tip. Those were, and Dr. Dre. Those were like my big producer idols, and I knew that those guys made a lot of beats by predominantly sampling classic soul, funk records, jazz records, and I couldn't do that if I was going to contribute to this royalty-free library. However, the music that I was always writing as Joe Bagale was kind of more rooted in classic soul, funk, and jazz. So I was like, well, what if I just like made my own samples? And so I one day experimented with just like coming up with like 30 seconds of music, which I was always really good at doing, because like I said, I could come up with stuff, I could never finish something. And so I came up with like a little sample, and I just like brought it into this program called Recycle that would allow me to turn it into samples to bring into this program called Reason, and that I could actually have it on a MIDI controller as a sampler, and I would just like speed it up or slow it down and play around with this little 30 seconds of music and find a new sequence until I just found something that got good to me, and I started hearing new music, and then I started programming beats around it, and that was the first hip-hop beat I'd ever made, was with my sample. And I was like, hey, this is kind of cool, you know? And then I started getting more into the sample, and I started making it sound like it was like an old record, and I'd like put vinyl pops on it, and I'd take these weird compressors and just make it sound like it's tape getting stretched in and out. And because I was so into the Beatles as a kid, or Prince, at this point I was already really into Prince, I was really into the way they would manipulate by using tape. And speeding it up sometimes really inspired me versus it being at its own speed or slowing it down. And sometimes slowing it down would inspire me. I would just work on it until something would inspire me. And then I started to really realize that this was as close as I could get to interacting with another musician by myself. And to me, that's like what music is all about, is interaction. It's the conversation. If you know the language, you know how to speak it, you know, and you know how to listen and react to it. And that's what we do when we talk to each other, right?
Did you imagine back then when you're working on those 30 tracks, did you have any idea that it would end up being more than just you doing your own music? Because you play with other musicians live as Otis McDonald. Like, did you have any idea yet at that time? I guess later in that same year.
No, it was all an experiment.
Yeah.
And because that music was so different than the stuff I had done before, I thought I didn't want to throw my fans off. Like, not that I had like millions of fans, you know. But I just was like, I'm going to put this out under a different name. And my wife was like, you should use the name Otis McDonald because it's catchy and it's kind of funny and it's reminiscent of like old McDonald.
Thanks, Justine.
Yeah, thanks, Justine. And so that's what I decided to put it out under. And in doing that, I knew that this would be an experiment. Like, can I create an artist on this particular platform, like out of thin air? Like, Otis McDonald has never existed. However, now I've realized that there is a person named Otis McDonald. He's no longer alive, but he was like this big Second Amendment activist in Chicago, and But anyway, rest in peace, Otis.
Sure.
But I have nothing to do with you. I came up with that name from these artists.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to see what would happen, and then very quickly, when those tracks started coming out, they started getting used a lot, and I saw that, and I was like, okay, I need to do something about this. And so I made an Otis McDonald channel on YouTube, and my wife and I designed a logo together, and I started talking to this woman that a vocal teacher of mine had introduced me to, this young woman, Ruby, who is like hyper intelligent and just like super with it young lady who it was like 10 years younger than me, but just like understood branding and understood how to teach somebody how to do that. Her whole thing was like, I'm not going to manage you, and I'm not going to do it for you, but I'm going to show you how to do it. And it was great. She sent me like this 50 questionnaire, and that I had to answer about myself, which is something I'd never done. And I learned how to like brand myself.
Right.
And so I built this channel. I built this logo. I put on my sunglasses and got this coat and started taking pictures of myself, like almost like a superhero costume. And I was like, I'm gonna go with Otis McDonald. Like, this is gonna be my new thing. And then eventually I put together a band full of multi-instrumentalists, so I could move around the stage playing different instruments. And as an audience member, anytime I saw bands that do that, like I saw Paul Simon's band in 2007, they would all switch instruments. I was just like, this is the coolest fucking show I've ever seen, you know? So I wanted to do that. And I quickly got all these guys together. These were my favorite musicians in the Bay. And we got together at Adam Thies's house in his studio and set up these GoPro cameras. And then my wife borrowed a camera from her friend. And I taught them a song called I Can't Stand, which I had just written. And we did like 3 takes of it, and I think the third take is the one that we made a video. And then when my cousin John was visiting, not long after I had made that video, but I hadn't put the video out, my cousin John, who's an artist from Detroit, he was visiting, and I was telling him about what I'd been doing and how I'd been approaching making tracks by, like, mixing old with new technology. He was like, man, that's like essentially what I've been doing with my visual art, like taking the approach of like collage art but bringing it into the digital domain and manipulating it that way. And he started showing me his work, and I was like, man, this shit is so cool. And I was like, maybe we could do stuff together. He was like, you can use any one of these pieces of art you want. And so I started using his artwork that he had already made and pairing it with my tracks, because I started taking notice of other bands that when you went to their YouTube channel, like a lot of their thumbnails all looked a certain way, associated with that particular band. Like the band Wolfpack was like a great influence to me. Like the way all their videos had this weird kind of like light sky blue color and this image in the center that was kind of like messed up, so it looked like there was like 3 images of the same thing. But all their thumbnails looked like that, and I was like, okay. And they had a logo, and they had a little Sonic brand, like before all of their videos, and I was like, so I came up with my own, and I was like, I'm gonna fucking go for this, and I started putting out all these what I call art tracks with my cousin's art and the music that was from the library, and then I started putting out live videos from the studio, well, with just this one video with the band. And at that point, like, my subscriptions were going up because people were coming to hear those full tracks after seeing them in other viral videos.
I was going to ask, how were they being used? Or, like, in what medium, what capacity?
In anything. It could be a makeup tutorial. It could be a fucking cat video, but there was these 2 particular YouTubers that were using my stuff a lot, and they were very big, and still are very big. One is called iDubbbz, and the other guy, this guy Ethan, his channel is called H3H3. They're both kind of comedy YouTube channels, but definitely more appealing to like teenagers. It's not super for me, but I really appreciate them using my music, and I've had a nice rapport with them since, just via messaging on Instagram and Twitter and stuff like that. And they're super thankful and appreciative of my music and being able to use it for free, which is great.
Any other podcasts besides this one that you know of?
Well, H3H3 has their own podcast. Okay. There's a ton of podcasts, actually. I don't know the names of them.
Right.
Because I get emails all the time, and they're like, hey, can I use your music? And I'm like, sure, just give me the credit. I can't say no. I knew that, like, if I made music and I didn't hold back the quality and made it as good as possible, that there would be some people that would use it in their videos, and there would be at least a percentage of those viewers of those videos would want to find out where that music is coming from.
Right.
And so if I played my cards right, it would all work, and it worked, and it just became more and more popular, and it's been completely grassroots. I say that with quotations in this new digital age, but I haven't put any money behind like PR or anything like that for Otis McDonald. I just wanted to see if I could do this, like if this could become a thing. And when I started putting out the videos showing of me playing music with other musicians, then people were like, holy shit, this guy like actually plays music. Like, yeah, like I made all that music, but it's I started to realize like a lot of teenagers and the people that were watching these videos that were getting hip to my music are, these kids have grown up watching music where it's like predominantly like pressing buttons,
right?
Which is cool too. I mean, there's some incredible button pushers out there, or guys that use MPCs and play drums that way, but that's just not what I grew up doing. And so all the Otis McDonald music, like, it's all me playing everything. It's not just like a bunch of drum loops and it's like I'm playing synthesizers, and I am using drum machines, but I'm playing it and I'm not quantizing it. Because Jay Dilla didn't quantize it, and that shit feels like a human to me, and I want it to feel human. And but I still wanted to write songs and not just make beats. And so I felt that since this stuff was becoming popular, the beats, that maybe I could slowly start introducing people, these Otis McDonald fans, to the songs that I was writing as Joe Bagale.
And what a great
just put them all together.
way to do that.
Yeah. I've got a new record coming out, either the end of the summer or the beginning of September, the beginning of the fall. I guess that's summertime for out here. That is like the beginning of our summer.
It is, yeah.
So at the beginning of a Bay Area summer,
that's your title right there.
there will be a brand new Otis McDonald album, and in some ways kind of like the debut album of Otis McDonald. And the title of the album is People Music. And the reason it's called People Music is because the people were the ones that have made me popular. And at the beginning of this year, for the first 15 weeks of this year, I put out a new snippet of a brand new track every week for 15 weeks, with the intent that the people will choose what is the most popular song, and or what are the 10 most popular songs. And so I did that with my business partners, my team, and we took all the 15 tracks and went through all the analytics. We did a bunch of stuff. It was like likes versus dislikes of all time, likes of all time, like views per week, and narrowed it down to the 10 tracks that fit into those categories. And then I finished those songs and sequenced it as a 10-track album. And then I brought it down a few weeks ago. I brought it down to Los Angeles, and I had it mastered by the great Bernie Grundman. And Bernie Grundman has mastered like half of my record collection. So like albums like Thriller and Purple Rain and Aja and like so much stuff. And it's going to come out on vinyl. And it's also going to be on streaming services. And it's also going to coincide with me launching my company called Track Tribe, and which is like my label. And the album will be available to download for free and use in your videos, royalty free. And all I'm asking for is actually a charitable donation. And the charity, we're playing around with a few different charities, but I think the one we're going to work with is Why Hunger. And we're going to try to raise $1 million. And instead of bringing money back to me, we're going to bring the money to the people. So it's People Music.
That was Joe Bagale, a.k.a. Otis McDonald. Join us next week for another musical podcast, this time with hip-hop blogger Joy Ng. Music for the podcast, and we hope it's obvious by now, is by Otis McDonald. Film photography is by Michelle Kilfeather. Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to learn about some of the stuff we do besides the podcast. Find all 80 episodes on our website, storiedsf.com, which, again, is where you can go to pledge your support for what we do. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review the show for us. Send comments or suggestions to storiedsf@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.